Good morning and welcome to the first day of our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit, Race to 22. We are so excited to have our summit kick off today with these amazing panelists, Jill, Jen, and Dini. And I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us. These 3 days wouldn't be possible without the work of our amazing sponsors. Thank you to the teams at Atrium, Spiff, Vidyard, SalesLoft, Chorus, Verison Concert, DemoStack, Ring DNA, and Sendoso. We really appreciate all that you do for us. For some background, today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission at MSP is to create an environment for our 20K and growing members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners. We do that through great live sessions, like what you're about to experience over the next 3 days, through our robust online forum, and in the near future, in-person events. Those of you who weren't previously admitted, you should now have access to the community. If you don't, please don't hesitate to notify our team via a note on modernsaleshq.com. This week's summit will be helping you to finish 2021 strong and to hit the ground running in 2022. We are kicking it off this morning with this panel. You won't hit your revenue goals without the right headcount. At 11 a.m., we will have a roundtable discussion on why 2022 will be the year of the data-driven manager. And this afternoon, we will conclude our first day with MSP founder Pete Kazanji as he talks about Moneyball for Sales, a masterclass in data-driven sales management. All in all, it should be an exciting first day. For today's agenda, we'll go over some housekeeping and speaker introductions before diving into our discussion prompts. Our first prompt is headcount planning for the next year, followed by how to build a successful onboarding and ramping, and then thinking through SKOs for 2022. We'll follow it all up with a great live Q&A from you, our audience, and our panelists will provide their key takeaways. Now for those housekeeping notes. First, yes, we promise this event is being recorded. You probably already heard that announced, and you'll be able to access this recording and the key takeaways on the previous events page on our MSP website. We'll also be sending you emails throughout the week, letting you know when things are available so that you'll know exactly where to access this information. Second, if you have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A function and not the chat, and we'll be sure to get to them during the event. Now, enough from me. I am beyond thrilled to introduce MSP MVP Richard Harris, who will be moderating today's event. Those of you active on the forum are already familiar with him and the great insight he provides. He's all around fantastic, and we're so happy to have him lead this amazing panel. So Richard, over to you.
I just want to make sure we're recording that because I really need to make sure my wife hears it. So thank you for the very kind introduction, but it's not about me today. It is about our guests and about the topic. I want to introduce everybody super quick and we're going to dive right in. Jill, Chiara, and Jill, I didn't even ask you, so I hope I pronounced your name right, from MetaCX. So if I didn't, please chastise me publicly, it's okay. Jen Spencer from SmartBug Media. I've known Jen for many, many years, always insightful, always fun to chat with her. And Dini Mehta, the CRO of Lattice. And again, Dini, you're welcome to, beat me publicly as well. So with that being said, I want to jump right into things. Like I want to just get through it. And let's talk about capacity planning first, right? So what are the things as you think about going into 2022 where you're thinking of your capacity? And I'm just going to open it up to the floor and let everybody just sort of chime in when they want.
Well, I'll start. And Richard, yeah, you did bastardize my last name.
Of course.
So that's a strike, and this is being recorded so we can make sure your wife heard that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, it's Jill Chiara. And I like to tell people it's like Chianti. So the CH is a hard C, and people just seem to remember that. So there you go. Anyway, so capacity planning, you know, the theme of this series of this webinar series is making me antsy, because we have to start thinking about 2022. It's just around the corner. And it's always that very difficult time of year where you're trying to close out your business. Most of us are either at or near a calendar year end, and then also plan for next year. And it is super challenging. So when I think about capacity, I'm in a business right now where we're in hyper growth mode. In the last 3 roles, I've been building enterprise sales teams. Enterprise sales takes a year to build in the first place. And when you hire someone, they're really not going to be at full capacity for nearly a year. So you have to plan for the loss of that and build that into your budget and work with your CFO to make sure he or she understands that as well. And then when will the revenue actually come? So it's a challenging thing. And if you're trying to double or triple your business, if you're in a startup capacity, that's tough. Or if you're even just trying to maintain and grow single digits or low double digits, that's also challenging. So
I want to pause you there, Jill. And first of all, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it. I am not above reproach, and I hope I don't. I'm working on not mansplaining things too much. So.
Oh, thank you.
That being said, my question for you is, how do you find that person? Like, it's hard to find that rep that's going to take a year. And I know this wasn't necessarily something we discussed ahead of time, but it's so important in that interview process. Like, are there just 2 or 3 tidbits any of you could provide to say, okay, if you're hiring for someone who's going to take a year to, you know, really start growing the revenue, what are those things?
So I'm gonna jump in here. So and for context, so SmartBug, we're a marketing agency, and as my role as Chief Revenue Officer, I'm responsible for sales, for marketing, and then for client services. So Richard, when you said capacity planning, there was like this chill that went down my spine, because the hardest part of my job is we can sell a bunch of stuff, but then there's actually people who have to do the work, right? And so that's when we think about, like, how do we have the right headcount for sales? We're also looking at, do we have the right headcount on the customer service side to actually service what we sell? That's not for this panel. But I think it's an important aspect as well. So I believe in recruiting all the time, and always building relationships and keeping those people close. And so I think, and this is my marketer brain, like with this concept, but I think about, there's a certain persona, there's a certain sales persona who I know is going to be really successful working here inside of our organization, that might be different from inside of another organization, whether it's a software company or another services company.
What are those pieces? Like, that's what I want people to walk away. Okay, so what are those persona pieces?
Well, I think I think of, who do we sell to? So who is the buyer persona we sell, and then what we sell to, and then who's best positioned to serve them. So I'm looking for someone that's like a highly consultative type of salesperson who believes in that buyer journey, the customer journey, and is there to support that customer all along the way. Someone who is constantly consuming information, trying to up their game, trying to learn more and be on the cutting edge of in our case, inbound marketing, but whatever it is that you do. And so those are some of like the intangibles that to me are far more important than just where they worked last and what kind of a team they were on. Those things are important as well, but I'm also looking for some of those soft skills.
Yeah.
Totally agree. How about you,
The
Dini?
continuous learning piece is huge, and really understanding, trying to tease that out of them in that interview process is critical.
Yep, totally agree. Dini, how about you? What are you looking for to find that right person?
Totally. And I'll quickly introduce myself for context. My name's Dini Mehta. You got my first name right, which is a pro, Richard. So kudos to you. Last name, some work needed. But yeah, I'm Houdini without the who for folks that are learning to pronounce my name. I've worked at startups all my career. And so, yeah, capacity planning, I have a lot of scar tissue from doing it wrong, making a lot of mistakes, and not sort of thinking about the infrastructure needed for the capacity roles to thrive. And so, yeah, when this topic was presented, I was super excited to talk with all these amazing folks on this panel. With hiring specifically, one of my learnings is just early on, how do you get very specific about the profile? And there's the cultural, the values fit part, and then there's the functional fit part. The functional fit part of the role depends on the stage. Like early on, you want folks super entrepreneurial, very resourceful, will help you do discovery, bring that information back, and can on their own adapt to the changing product, the changing marketplace. Over time, that changes to you want builders. Now you have a sense for sort of what is the process that works. And in the final stages, you want your scalers who can just execute on the existing playbook and help you optimize and tweak. And so we early on sort of put together competencies that are used not just for hiring, but even for internal promotions. So here's the specifics that and a lot of times at startups, folks are like, oh, I'm just going to talk to people and figure it out. But my experience, and I've made that mistake, is the earlier you can align on the competencies that make someone successful in a role, the better it is for your overall people infrastructure.
Great. I want to shift subjects, and I'm because I know we got a lot of content, because I don't mean to cut people off. So please, bear with me. It is you've heard the Great Resignation. You've heard it's a war on recruiting, and I want to know how you guys are each approaching it. And I'm going to throw this concept out there again, not something we talked about. I don't believe that it's as much the Great Resignation as much as it is the Great Retention. Like, that's a huge piece. If you are concerned about people resigning, then you should really be concerned about retention. But coming to recruiting, it never stops. How often do you do it? How are you doing it? The question came in from the chat, which is recruiters, yes, no, likes, dislikes. So I'll just sort of throw in, maybe we'll start at the back end. Dean, and let you go first on this one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Richard. I don't know if it's the Great Resignation. I think it's the Great Shuffle, where folks are looking to find the next step in their journey where they feel like they belong and are finding meaning in their life. I think this last 18 months have given folks space to figure out what they want. So yeah, I'm a huge believer you've got to be hiring all the time. ABH, I tell my team that you've got to be spending 40% of your time building your network, talking to great people, because at the end of the day, it's about the ability to hire, recruit, manage, and retain amazing people. Because if you can find great people, all the other problems become easier to
You're spending 40% of your time recruiting people, or spending time with your team to make sure they are staying there?
Both.
Got it.
So,
okay.
So collectively pushing my team to make sure we're rethinking our hiring practices. I'm involved in a lot of the hiring. We're doubling and tripling every year as an org. And to do that well without lowering our quality bar, I found that you need that sort of collective commitment from everyone in the org. And it has to be the hiring manager's got to be accountable to it. So yeah, I spend a lot of my time recruiting. Even when we don't have open headcount, I'm talking to folks, great people, because you never know when the right fit happens.
Are we all just jumping in?
Yeah,
Are we going to call? I was just, it's crazy out there right now. Like it's wild. And like, I know we talked about, okay, is it the Great Retention, Great Resignation? It's a little bit of both. I think I have conversations with people. I had an interview with someone last week who said, like, I was trying to figure out like where they wanted to be and like where they wanted to grow and like how this role with us was going to help them get to that next level. And he was like, if I'm going to be honest with you, and by the way, like perfect on paper, all those things, right? If I'm going to be honest with you, it's, I want that like leadership title and salary, but without having to do the work. And
That's what they
like,
said?
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah.
cow. All right.
I'm like, is this the new normal? Because I'm like, what's going, all right, here we go. This is what's going on. And there's people who, they want like, they're into like the gig economy. Like they want to be able to wake up that morning and decide what they want to do and who they want to do it with and where they want to do it from. And they want all that flexibility. And we're in a position right now where, yeah, like they kind of can sort of do that because everyone's sort of in this like scramble mode. But to your point, Richard, where I'm focusing my energy is spending more time with the people that work with me day in and day out and listening to them and asking them like, what brought you here? Does that reason still resonate? What do you love about your job? What are the parts of your job that you just like, they're things you have to do, but you really don't like doing them? So we can figure out, well, is there a way we can automate that away? Is there someone else we can put in place for that? Is there a process we can change? How do we like optimize that work environment for you? And then what we did is we like double or actually tripled the incentive for employee recruitment. So where, rather than paying, we've got some recruiters, but I believe like our talent, the people who work with us right now, they are the best recruiters. So I'd rather put money in their pocket to go help me find more people because there's only so many hours in the day.
And I would just add, that, I think that employment is shifting and COVID has kind of catapulted that shift. But I think there's really great people out there still. And as a leader, what I've done over the course of the last 25 plus years is focus on trust. And if you actually show trust from the beginning, you'll get that back and you'll get loyalty back. And when I agree completely with Dini, I just said Houdini in my head. And, it's about understanding, especially in a startup, or if you're in a more established organization, at what stage are you hiring and are they ready for that stage? But when you bring them in, give them that trust. And I think that's what's forced us to acknowledge COVID has forced us to trust people, right? And have a very different work environment. But with that, it's checking in with them regularly and proving that you trust them, proving that you care about them, that you're grateful, but they've got to give back. And what Jen said is a little scary. What that candidate said to her, if that's coming, we've got to tackle that. But hopefully that's temporary. And hopefully we'll be able to continue to find the golden nuggets out there because I do believe they still exist.
Yeah, I think that I think we've already been there based on the companies I've worked with and the people I've worked with. I've seen tons of people. I've seen reps, they take a job and they're still in the interview process with 2 or 3 people. And I've seen them take the job and within 2 weeks, they leave and they go to the next job because the other companies come along and offering an extra 10 grand, and then the first company gets upset of like, why would you do that to me? And it's like, well, wait a minute, the market's paying me this. So it's tough. Like, it's not easy. I can't necessarily fault people for that. If they got to take care of their life. I mean, 10 grand now, if I annualize that and, look at forward cash flow, that's a lot of money in my life. So my advice is people got to pay the market rate. I don't care what your CFO says or your CEO says, you better pay the market rate or, stop asking for a Ferrari on Pinto parts. Stuff.
Yeah, agree with that.
So how do you, any of you, what tips do you have for people looking at recruiters, right? Like, how do you how do you trust your recruiter, Jill? I think you said it well. It's like, you got to hire people and you got to trust them, but recruiters are out for themselves too. Like, they love to say, no, we're not, we're out for, I'm like, please, come on. Like, you're in a sales cycle. How do you find the right kind of recruiter for you?
Wow, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Go ahead, Jen.
We're hiring for internal recruiters. So like super meta, right? Like I'm pulling that in because we do believe that the best recruiter is going to be from internally. But we do have some external recruiters for very specific roles. So, my recommendation is find the people who that's what they specialize in. If you're looking for you need to hire an enterprise salesperson that works in a specific vertical, find the recruiter. There's a recruiter who does that, right? So I would go with it. It's better to have like 4 or 5 different recruiters that you're managing that specialize than to have one sort of like big box store recruiter who's more general, because your time is really precious. And so if you're reviewing those candidate profiles and you're seeing what they've kind of queued up, you're going to want quality over quantity. So that's just one of my recommendations.
Yeah, I would just add to that. One of the things that I've seen work well is similar to Jen, where we have an internal recruiting team that's amazing and does a lot of the volume-based capacity roles. But with that, the trade-off is they don't have time to go deep on the specialized roles they need to hire. Enablement, ops, management, because they're focused on the AE hiring. And so one of the things that we've done is we've used recruiting partners for almost top of the funnel volume. And we're still, relying on our internal recruiting team to help us qualify. Because at the end of the day, the external partners, even if with the best intentions, are only able to represent and qualify to a certain extent. And so having the muscle of, all right, we're not going to spend time sourcing for these specialized roles, and we're going to lean on the external recruiting partners, and then still sort of make sure that we're filtering using our values, using our hiring process, is something that has worked well.
Yeah, I like that layered approach too, because oftentimes the internal recruiters who have the best of intentions aren't necessarily the best at hiring a salesperson, right? And it's nothing against an internal recruiter. I trust my internal recruiters. They can help me get to certain places, but it's also like, don't ask Richard or, maybe any of you don't, I'm not going to hire a developer. Like, I wouldn't know what in the world to recruit that person for. So, I can certainly find some personality stuff, but I love how you said sort of still using the external with the internal. Just to close out this topic, and then we'll move on to the next slide, is work from home, because this has changed everything too. As Jill was talking about, COVID has taught some things about trust. And the biggest question I get is, okay, so if I'm in the Bay Area and I gotta pay somebody this salary, but I'm gonna go recruit somebody in Phoenix where the salary and the lifestyle doesn't necessarily, I wouldn't say necessitate, but it's different to live in San Francisco than it is to live in Tempe or something like that, or Tucson. How do you navigate that salary conversation? Or is it still, we're figuring it out? Because I think it's happening. I don't have this conversation, so I'm curious if y'all have figured this out at all.
Yeah, in sales, it's pretty straightforward. I pretty much have a band of what I pay senior AEs based on years of experience and what I expect them to, what type of quota I expect them to carry and when I want them to be ramped. At this point, it really doesn't matter where they live. I will pay the same. I will say I didn't subscribe to that philosophy a few years ago, and we did pay higher in New York City and San Francisco. But now, so I think what's happened is other salaries have come up and those salaries have become a little more reasonable. Agreed.
Jen,
yeah, similarly. Yeah, I mean, we're fully remote. We've always been fully remote. And so when everyone went remote, we were like, oh, welcome to our club. So we have similar, like very, very similar, Jill. Like we've got those bands And we've got kind of like the low and the high, and we might like consider that, but honestly, we use that fully remote model to attract talent in the spaces and places that fit the salary bands, right? And so there we don't have a lot of people in San Francisco because it is so ridiculous. Having grown up there, it is so ridiculously expensive to live there. That's why I live in Phoenix now.
So, a couple of questions coming in from the audience. So one's from Connor, talking about the internal recruiter approach, but what cadence should they have? Is it more about outbound calling like an SDR or more logistic process management? Like, what's the cadence for this?
I can take this. What we found helpful is on the capacity-based role. So first you start with the prioritization, just like you would if you were an SDR and had an account list to go after. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And so you got to start with your roles and say, all right, here's your P1 that we need to get right. And these are the P1s that you're going to source and recruit. And for those specific roles, yeah, you should get down to like how many, you should measure the funnel like you would with an SDR role. Like how many messages are you sending out? What is our open rate? What is our conversion rate? What's our reply rate? And then once we talk to them, all right, we need to tweak some stuff there. And then for the roles where we're playing qualifying as a recruiting team, I would say there it's more about, how do we make sure that we're keeping velocity with candidates, because it's a candidates market. And if we can't move fast, we're going to lose great people. And so I think it's more about just scalable process of the top of the funnel that our recruiting partners are driving for us. So that's something that we found is like marrying both pieces and creating structure for the team.
And I'd say, I would add that you just want to step out of a process when it's absolutely necessary and you've got a hot candidate, and just put them right with the CEO or your most senior person right away. So they know and you aren't missing out. And stay very close. If you're the CRO, stay very close to that candidate, because the smallest thing in the process can leave a bad taste in someone's mouth choosing between two organizations. So it's really critical to stay close to that.
Yep. Great. Just real quick, because I know we need to get on to the next two topics, but great question came from Robin. Has base and OTE shifted? As I understand it, is traditionally, particularly at the enterprise level, it's 50-50, right? So you get a 150 base, and 150 bonus. Like, what are you guys seeing just quickly off the top of your head based on different roles?
I haven't deviated from that kind of that ratio here.
I haven't either.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
And would you say if you were hiring an SDR or BDR, that would still be a 50-50, or is it maybe a little shifted, different than an AE?
That definitely has shifted for me. And even SCs, solutions consultants or pre-sales, I've put a little more skin in the game for them. So that shifted maybe in the opposite direction, where there's more upside for them. Yep. Because they are doing so much discovery and on so many of the calls. And have such a dog in the fight, if you will.
Yeah.
With SDRs, you want to build them for the long term. So sometimes padding the base is a good idea.
That's great. All right, let's go on to the next one, which is about onboarding and ramping. When we were planning, I sort of threw out this theory of stop calling it onboarding or ramping, because you're trying to define a specific time frame. It doesn't mean you don't have milestones, right? And maybe I'm just renaming stuff for the sake of, because that's what Richard likes to do. But how do you guys view that? And each of you probably have different perspectives of that based on what your sales cycle's like. So maybe even understanding what your sales cycle's like to help us understand where your answer's coming from would be supportive too.
Anyway. All right, let's not all jump in at once.
I know there's a lot there.
I know, I'm like, where do I want to start? My sales cycle's like around 30 days ish, right? So it was kind of 26. We moved a little bit up market, so it's been adding a little bit of time. We're now more like 34, 35, but it means that we get data pretty fast. right? Which is really nice. And it means that we can really use we can be really effective during a new sales rep's onboarding, because they're getting to do these ride-alongs, they're getting to consume kind of call recordings and be on these presentations and actually watch something go through procurement, all within like about a month and a half, that time frame, which allows us to ramp our team, our sales reps, pretty quickly, which I know is very different from, if someone, has more of like a 60 or 90-day sales cycle. So I'm definitely benefiting from that as part of their training and onboarding.
I can go next. So at Lattice, we've got both sales motions. We've got a transactional side of the business, which is definitely focused on velocity and about 35-day sales cycle. And majority of that is inbound as well. And so there's a certain element of folks coming to us have already identified a need. And then we've got an upmarket business that's about 100-day sales cycle. And so we have both profiles. We have a lot of folks that are straight out of college, moving into a sales development role, and eventually become our commercial AE. And then we hire experienced AEs for our upmarket segments. And so we've got sort of both. And that sort of creates a certain level of complexity. And so my job is to make sure that we're not getting to a world where we're letting every manager and every segment pick their own adventure, because there is a certain level of standardization you just want, as this is the Lattice way of doing things. And so we've put in a lot of effort in like aligning on what is that standardized approach to onboarding. First is the company onboarding, values, what makes us unique, why are we doing what we're doing, then focused on the sales specific role. And then the final piece is sort of going deeper on the team specific nuances, because it is different for, if you're closing a 30-day inbound deal to if you're closing a 100-day outbound cycle. And so we have some nuances, but the specialization comes later on.
Jill, how about you? You're in that unique, enterprise space where it's very different, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's your average sales cycle and even your average deal size? Because I think that plays a role in this too.
Yeah, so average sales cycle is 6 to 12 months. And deal size is 6 figures, into the 6 figures. We do some pilots for less than that, annual pilots. And I throw them right in. So within a week of starting, I have them pitch my go-to-market team on the vision deck. And since we're selling software that really is new and different, and it's hard to describe, and it's a bit amorphous, the more times they talk about it, the better. And they'll just get better and better with those conversations. So I even say, call up your friends and pitch them.
Do you require some level of, this is one thing I've been encouraging people is, and I don't, even if it's a 2-week sales cycle all the way to a year, do you require some level of certification per se that they have to, they're not going to get fired if they fail the test, maybe the 3rd time, but how are you building that in? Have you always built that in to your process?
I have in previous jobs. We definitely had certification at Forrester. We're, a very buttoned up organization with respect to sales. Here, I don't. I make them do a pitch, and then we all give them feedback. And I've had a few people do pretty poorly. And so until they do well, I don't put them on the phones.
Well, that's an unofficial piece, right? Like
it's
an unofficial certification.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. That's right. But I'm hiring at a much more senior level, so they've got it down and they can pretty much fudge a really good call.
Yeah, you're hiring a different animal. Totally. Yeah, I got it. Right. I hope that at your level, those people know how to do, 80% of the pitch, and then you're teaching them things like industry knowledge and how your specific, personas matter and that kind of stuff. So I totally respect that. How about you, Jen? Do you guys have certification, or have you done certifications?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Because
Uh-oh.
it's much more important. It's much more important to me. My sales team, they are inside there. They're marketers, like masquerading as sales professionals, right? I guess they wouldn't like me to say that. They are sales professionals. But what's more important is not that they know how to pitch SmartBug. What's most important, they're going to be best at pitching SmartBug if they understand what's going on with that buyer persona, with that prospect, and they know what needs to be prescribed in order to alleviate that pain. And so for that reason, even like people that are coming, like incoming to our to apply, we look for, do you have an inbound marketing certification? Do you have a Google certification? If you don't, it's right there. Like we value people who went, hey, I didn't have this, I went and got it for free, as a part of applying. And then when they first do come on board, there are some initial certifications we want them to get. And then our company is just really, we really embrace learning and development. And so we have quarterly certification days that the whole company participates in, and other specific sessions are prescribed to each rep. Like, this is something you need to focus on. And then that's where it might get into more like sales kind of skills and what have you. But I'm looking for, can you have a conversation with a CMO of a high growth organization and come out of that with that CMO being like, this person knows what they're talking about, and I want to continue that conversation. If they can do that, great. And so I do think those certifications are really important.
One thing I want to point out, I hope it's obvious, but I don't think people always see it, is your onboarding and ramping is a huge part of your recruitment strategy. You want them to know, and disagree or agree, but you want that candidate to know that, hey, yes, at some point you got to get on the phone, but hey, this is how we're better. This is how we're different because we care. And you got to show them. Like, I think Jill was talking about that earlier, like this trust of like, hey, I want you to trust that we care so much that here's what your program is going to look like. And you're going to get this many coaching times with me or this many coaching times with the team, because that's a huge recruitment piece, particularly. And I can't remember who said it. I think it was you, Jen, who said, those who want to keep educating themselves, their own self-education, this helps facilitate that too. So if people haven't ever connected those two dots, particularly now in the recruiting wars we have, I think it's important to put those two things there. How do you navigate, okay, we got to teach them the industry, we got to teach them the personas, we got to teach them our internal systems, we got to teach them all these little things, right? Because it's not like, okay, look, it was, I think we're all seasoned enough to have been like, okay, here's 2 days of, features and benefits, go listen to Bob on the phone. Bob doesn't actually do anything. He just sort of, talks crap about the manager, and, and then you're like thrown to the wolves, right? How do you navigate that stuff? Because I think a lot of leaders have that internal anxiety, either the CEO or the CEO. Well, when are they getting on the phone? When are they going to start producing around? Like, how do you guys how do you navigate all those little things along with that anxiety?
Bob needs to have a talk, that's for sure.
Yeah, Bob goes on a pip right after that. I agree with you.
Oh, you know what? Can I throw back a learning? This is like full circle here, Richard. So I was starting to build a sales team at Allbound, and I was there, and I called Richard, and because he's always so helpful, and said, I'm kind of freaking out about making the wrong decision here, and who I'm going to bring on, and you said something to me about like, listen, no one is going to have all of these pieces. Like, no one's going to have all of the things that you need. So you need to decide what's the thing that you have like the time, energy, desire to teach and coach, and what are the things that you just want them to have. And I was like, okay. So then that like set this expectation with myself, like, you're not going to find this like unicorn special person who just like you can drop into your organization. Like, that's just not going to happen. All right. And then also really like checking in with myself as a sales leader, like, okay, what am I good at? And what am I maybe not as strong at? Or what is maybe something like I need them based off of our like level of where we are as an organization? what I need those folks to kind of come in and be able to do. And so I think depending on what your answer is to that and like that will tell you what kind of a leader you are and what kind of a sales team you're building. I think that impacts like how quickly you're going to be like getting people involved, getting them on calls, what kind of tasks and initial like assignments you're going to be giving them. Because I even think about our team and like the ramps that we've had for our sales reps, and they haven't all been exactly the same because they've been slightly adjusted based off of that person and what they're coming in with skill wise, which isn't very scalable. I get it, but for us, it works.
Just to build on that, Jen, I love that. And I think like having one way to like connect like what you're hiring for, what are your must-haves, all the way in their employee journey is like, all right, we're going to build an onboarding program against these competencies. So if someone's strong in these 3 areas, here's the course and the sort of ramp process or onboarding process they're going to go through. Here's how we're going to build our career tracks and how internal mobility and promotions are going to work. And so that can become the common language all the way from recruiting to HR and everything in between. So yeah, huge fan of that. I love that addition that you just added.
And, you know, just call out strengths on your team. So I onboarded a new guy last week and I said, go to this person because they do this really well. Go to this person because they do this really well. And then, you know, so on and so forth. And by the way, shout out to Gong or Chorus as well. Yes. Those tools are fantastic tools. 100%. And I'm sure there are others. I've used both of those, just fantastic. And you can go in and say, watch these 3 calls, and this is why these 3 calls are superior to these 3 calls, right? But I want you to watch both and tell me what you think as well. So that's super helpful.
I completely agree. Like, you know, and love that Course is sponsoring this with MSP, that if you aren't using these tools, it's crazy. Right? They were nice to haves a few years ago. They're must haves. And it's interesting. I'm Gen Xer, right? Like the level of something like a Chorus, I would have felt like I was being micromanaged, right? The interesting piece is the younger generations, the millennials and the Gen Zs, that's coaching for them. And they're used to it. And it's lovely. I mean, it's one of the reasons I love working with millennials, because they keep telling me how badly we were taught and we were try to teach. So I love that. And I love those tools for that. And I mean, we can go on forever about that stuff. I want to jump into the last topic, and then we've only got about 5 minutes on it because I've let things go long before we do Q&A. But SKO, are we doing them? Why are we doing them? Are they really worth it? How do you do it virtually? Like, I mean, there's a ton of questions around this. So just jump in on anything you want to talk about with SKO.
We're still doing them. But they're different than when I worked for Paychecks, and like everyone flew in and like there was like obscene amounts of food and it was all like, that's not my universe, right? Like I work for a fully remote company. So we did remote, right? We have like a pocket agenda and everyone's different time zone. They're not like a multi-day event. It's like kind of a like more condensed, like kind of I would say 3/4 of a day, where we're ordering lunch also in like direct drop kind of those people, or giving them like a gift card so they can get like a Grubhub or Uber Eats or whatever, to try to engage them, pulling in members of our marketing team and CS team for different sessions. But really it's, you know, to me, it's important. Are you going to do a bunch of like training and development during that SKO? Probably not, right?
Don't.
You know, like that's not the time. Tell me how you really feel, Richard.
I'm going to leave it there because it's about you.
Yeah. No, but you know, it's about like one of the things that's so hard if you've been an individual contributor and you know, like you hit your number for the month or for the quarter or for the year, and you feel like $1 million, and then the next day you feel like garbage because you're like, well, nah, I'm just back at like 0, right? So we as leaders, like we have to infuse this like energy and get people excited about this, like this next year, because otherwise it can be really exhausting, and you'll get sales reps who will burn out. And even if they're successful, they'll start, looking other places. And so I do think that it's important to do this. And we do like little micro versions of it every quarter too.
Yeah, I was going to build on that. Huge plus one to that, Jen. I hate training at SKOs. And my job is to pick a theme that's going to inspire the broader org and help edit down to make sure it's super high impact and high value for attendees. It's not a time for me to do change management. It's a time to celebrate the people that have helped us get here. And if you're going through hyper growth, what I found is do mini SKOs. So we do one at the start of the year, and then we do one at the midpoint, because things look so different every 6 months that we can't wait a year. So I think some of this depends on the phase as well. I have 3 rules that, for any event, whether it's a team meeting, whether it's onboarding programs, is like, to make it high impact, it has to be actionable for all the folks in the audience. If it's not, then you should probably do breakout rooms, figure out new ways to make it high value for the folks that are in the room. And then incorporate our values. What do we want people to feel when they're in that event for 2 hours, 3 hours, and build the agenda off of that event.
So pause right there, Dini. Will you just, like, in the 1-word bullet point, what are those 3 things again? Because I think those are really critical takeaways for, I think, the listeners.
Totally. Number 1, make it actionable for everyone in the audience. Okay. Not just a part of it. Don't make your OGs sit through something that they already know. Like, cut it out. Do it with the new folks. Make it actionable for everyone in the audience. 2, how do you incorporate the values that you really want people to take away? I think you have to start with the feeling. That's what I do, is like, what do I want people to feel walking away from the SKO, and then build the agenda off of that. So incorporate collaboration, incorporate sort of live sessions where you're like popcorning questions and asking folks to share. And then 3rd, as a leader, this is your time to inspire. It's hard. You're pushing, going through a lot of rejection, going through a lot of no's, and it's my job, as Jen said, to ingest that energy into the team. So those are my three must-haves when you're building high impact events.
Super well said. I would underscore inspiration is what the primary purpose of sales kickoff should be.
Completely agree with that. Now, I will throw it back to the 3 of you, and then we'll go to our questions. I've talked to some leaders, and the questions come up of, with all the time and energy, not just of you, but the rest of your team, to plan and put on a SKO, which maybe we should start calling a revenue kickoff, because it's, to Dini's point, let's not just make it about the sales team, or a company kickoff, CKO. What if you gave everybody $2,500 cash, a flight voucher, and 4 days off? Wouldn't that also be meaningful to the burned out people, right? I'm all for the camaraderie, but I'm curious, just quickly, what you guys think of something like that. Not that you have to do it. I'm not going to hold you to it. So
I think what you'd be missing is alignment, and that would be a big miss, because alignment, it really does take a village to get to your annual goals, and people need to be marching together. And when they're not, you don't get anything accomplished.
I like that alignment piece. That's good.
Yeah, I agree. But also we have, it's easier for me to say that because we have like a mid-year full company event that is not quite what you're suggesting, but we do put people up at 5-star luxury resorts and fly them out and have these amazing experiences. So we do that kind of mid-year as a whole company. And that's just because we're remote. But my initial reaction when you're like, just give them the time off, I'm like, no, but I'm more fun. Like, come hang out with me. Like, we're going to have more fun.
I've hung out with Jen. She is fun. I promise. She's cool. She's a good time. We've had some fun. So anything else to add? Or we're going to move into questions. So, all right. We got a lot of questions, which I appreciate. And they actually are all about comp. That seems to be the most important theme to everyone. So just quickly.
Shocker.
Yeah. Right. And, which I actually think has to do with retention. Right. It has to do with retention and hiring and sort of all of these pieces tied together. First question from Christy. How do you approach quota setting? especially when the territories are going to shrink with more teammates, but revenue targets go up. And I will say this, my mom's in sales, and she always said, look, they're always going to cut your territory and they're going to raise your rate. Like they're always going to do that.
Right.
So, well, she's like, welcome to sales. I'm like, okay. How do you guys navigate that?
That's what that's one of the things that you do at kickoff is you roll out comp plans and you roll out goals and you roll out and you get folks excited about the fact that these are achievable, but they're also, they're a reason why they're not going to be easy for everyone. And you talk about how you're going to support them to get there. And that is exactly right. It's just like death and taxes.
So here's, I'm gonna push you a little bit on that one, Jill, because I've handed out enough goals and compensation, and never once did I go, "Oh my God, I'm gonna crush it." Like, it's like I appreciate that that's the goal of the organization.
That's right.
But there's some CFO and some CEO who were all trying to make millionaires and billionaires off our sweat. So as long as the goals are reasonable and achievable, I agree with you. But if people come in with these lofty ridiculousness goals that
I agree, but that's the CRO's job. Really, it's the CRO's job to make sure the CFO and the CEO aren't putting things out there that are absolutely ridiculous and unachievable.
Yeah.
Word. I agree. I mean, and because ultimately, if you're the CRO, you're looking at overall revenue growth for the organization. So it's your job to say, this is what's achievable through, like, this is what we have coming in from marketing, like what marketing is generated. And then this is what sales needs to be able to generate. And then you open up this whole other avenue where you're like, well, we have this existing customer base and there's these upsell or cross-sell opportunities and growth. At the end of the day, my board, they just we want to get to a certain number, right? How we get to that number, right? That's also my job to figure out what's going to make the most sense. Yeah. And so I think because of the role of the CRO, I think we're in a different place. Like I remember back in the bad old days of like saying, this is what I think we can achieve. And then having a board say, oh, that's great, but I'm going to add blah to it.
Oh, yeah.
And now you have, and we would celebrate when we like hit the goal, like when we hit the goal that we set for ourselves, we were like, yay, that's what was reasonable.
By the way, I'm going to advise folks, if you've never looked up the magic number and the phrase, the magic number in startup and revenue, go Google that phrase and you will learn some things. It's too long to go into here, but it's a really important piece. So there is a magic number. So
I didn't just rant and for no reason. My one piece of input here is don't be afraid to change. If you have the support of your team and your board and everything, everyone comes from a different place. Don't be afraid to make adjustments to kind of quotas and comp plans throughout the year. So I always reserve the right to say we might change things. And then when we do, which we have, when I have had to change things, we're able to have a very transparent conversation about why we're making the change. Yeah. And then I also really like to use, I like certain people in the organization that I've got, I know I've got a good relationship with, I really trust their judgment. And to be able to say, hey, how do you feel about this? What do you think the reaction will be? What do you, just getting some feedback. So it's not just pushed down. And I know I've got someone on the inside who's no, this is doable. And I see the path and I can help be an advocate for this change within the organization.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the piece that as leaders, we need to be better at is looking at our current pipeline, right? Looking at what the new target's supposed to be. How are we going to get that? Do we have the capacity internally from a sales headcount, but also a marketing support headcount? Mm-hmm. And how do we also then turn around and work with marketing on messaging and approaches versus sort of everybody finger pointing, the leads suck, you suck, all that kind of stuff. So a couple other questions. Sales teams, quarterly, semi-annual, or annual quotas? What do you like?
Annual for enterprise.
Yeah, it really depends on your sales cycle. So we've got monthly quotas because we're just go, 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 go. Mm-hmm. But that's just us.
Yeah, we're monthly quotas too with annual accelerators.
What how are you creating any adjustments in compensation around, okay, there's base and there's salary, OTE. Are there additional spiffs and bonuses? Are there additional, are your accelerators becoming bigger accelerators? This is the other thing I've seen is like, okay, once you get to 70% of your goal, you get 80% of your comp, you get to 80%, you get to 90, you get to 90, you get to 95, you get to 105 or something. So to sort of keep, all those things. So I threw out like 6 questions. You each have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I don't like that, what you just did, because then sales gets super confused. You need sales to always know exactly how much money they're going to make whenever they're sitting in front of someone. So the more complex the comp plan, the less sales will be bought into it. However, I do believe in specialized spiffs, because it will kind of march them in the place that your organization wants to go. And so I think that those are interesting if done well and rolled out correctly and communicated correctly, then I believe in those. I think those can be super impactful.
I love using spiffs and comp adjustments to incentivize like the behaviors that I want to see on the team, because I know that the sales team is motivated by money. So being in a services organization, there are times where it's a longer wait for someone to start, for the new client to start, because those resources are being used kind of somewhere else. So if I know that that's going to be a more challenging sale to get that deal locked down earlier, then I can throw out like a higher percentage for that, or a higher percentage on a specific line of business, or maybe a specific part of the market. And that comes back down to like making sure we're able to track it all. We've got the right analytics for it too. But using those drivers, I think, in our organization is really helpful for making people feel like they can, they have the ability to exceed their number, and also recognizing like when something might be tougher in your particular market, and that you're going to incentivize them, you're going to compensate them for that, because it's different than when they started, let's say. That's
great. I want to move forward into our sort of wrap up session of key takeaways. For each of you, I'm going to put something in the chat for the group, for everybody, but for each of you, what are the 1 or 2 things you want people to take away? Because we can't give them 20, right? Like you guys have given us so much knowledge, and I know that MSP is super excited. I appreciate you guys giving me the time to ask you all these questions and dig in, and sort of take us on some tangents. But what are the 1 or 2 key takeaways you think people should walk away from based on your experiences?
All right, I'll go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like we went from capacity planning to SKO to comp plans, which we covered a lot, which was awesome. But if I had to sum up all the things that we've talked today, it's 1, keep it simple. I hate the jargon and the overcomplicated stuff when you think that you're trying to do something complex, but keep it simple. 2, focus on the people. It's easy to sometimes overly put your company hat on, but I judge my performance based off of how much money my top performers are making. What is my overall attainment of the team? And so connecting to the 3rd, drive accountability. We publish all our numbers on a public page to our recruiter when we recruit people, saying here's our average attainment by segment, here's what we're going to sign up for. And so I think a lot of that transparency starts with all of us. And so those are my 3 takeaways. Definitely not tweet worthy, but
mine are know your people and leverage your people. So in terms of knowing your people, know what makes them tick, know what they're good at, know where they need extra help and support. So you're able to build kind of coaching and training around those individuals, and that they also become kind of internal trusted advisors for you as a sales leader to get feedback when maybe things are not going as well as you'd like. And then also that way you can use your people, leverage them to help attract others, get them talking about how amazing your onboarding and training program is, get them talking about how great the comp plan is, how amazing it is that marketing is just flooding you with leads, right? Because if I'm a sales rep and I'm looking to move to another organization, that's going to speak volumes if the existing sales team in that organization is like, hey, this is a really great place to work and to grow and to sell.
Awesome. How
And
about
I
you,
would
Gina?
sum it up with always be recruiting, always be training in bite-sized chunks, and always be building trust and showing gratitude.
Awesome. All right, we're going to turn it back over to Modern Sales Pros. Look at that. We just snuck it in under the wire.
Right on time. Thank you everyone so much for watching today. Thank you to our speakers. Round of applause, snaps for you. To our moderator, Richard Harris. This has been really fantastic. And to our sponsors, who of course this would not be possible without. We hope that we'll see you next time. We have full agenda today, but we're going to be doing a roundtable on how to be an awesome data-driven manager. I'm popping into the Zoom an agenda right now for all of you. And I will be there if you'd like to see my face again and you want to talk data-driven management. We will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day. Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Bye.
Bye, ladies.